Well, it's been 5 years since I've been back to the United States. I'm just about to head overseas again for a while, and I thought I would talk about my impressions after being away from the United States, coming back into it, especially in this crazy time. And I got three main observations: the size of people, the state of pop music, and what things cost. So here's my impression. The first thing is that I remember back in the 90s when I started to travel in and out of the United States, and if I was away for a few years, when I came back in, I noticed how big everyone got very suddenly. And people who grew up in the United States can see this. If you look at the old home movies, old street scenes from the 60s, 70s, everybody's skinny. Even the early 80s, people are kind of rail thin. It's more average to be rail thin. And those people who back then you used to say were fat, were heavy, those people today, when you look at their pictures, you say, well, they're hardly even portly. They're just kind of full-bodied. So starting in the 90s and the early 2000s, Americans really got massive, and it was really noticeable if you were not in the United States when that happened. And I think that maybe people, if you lived here in the U.S., it happened so gradually, you didn't realize it. I had people, when I brought this up, I had people who lived here say, oh no, it's always been like that, etc., etc. But something happened. Well, what I noticed this time is markedly there were a lot of people there weren't as many gigantic people as I used to see in the past. Of course, this is all my anecdotal information here in this video, but from my perspective in the Midwest, traveling around this area, it seemed a fall off on big giant people. However, still a lot of people, the vast majority of people are what I would call misshapen. So there's still a lot of very misshapen people. This is probably a function of the prosperity that the United States has undergone since the 1980s. How a lot of small towns that didn't even have a lot of restaurants, now they've got sit-down restaurants, and food is more highly processed, and more people eat more. I don't know what it is. I see all those reality TV shows, and the average person in those shows is still huge. So I don't know what happened to my countrymen, to make us so big and now so misshapen. It's a first observation. Second observation is pop music. And I would say that pop music is in a moribund state, if not dying. A lot of the current music seems to be very breathy voiced girls singing kind of direct, bland lyrics about everyday life. And the airways, and you can see this a little bit on YouTube, people the airways are filled with rock from the 80s and 90s. A lot of Bon Jovi, a lot of U2, even amazingly enough, tons of Phil Collins, Simple Minds. Didn't hear that much Springsteen. I'm a serial tuner on the radio, so I'm always tuning to the next station. So until I hear a song, I keep tuning. I never stay on one station. So I go through a lot of stations, and a lot of 80s and 90s music, and a lot of emphasis on guitar and rock, where current music is. And the reason I say the current music maybe is moribund or not as vital is that country music now in a lot of places in the U.S. is coming on strong. And in fact, rappers like Beyonce as well, people who were in pop music or in other genres of music, they've moved into country music. And also the big hits in the country music scene, when you listen to them, they just almost sound like pop music with a little countrified sound thrown into it. And this reminds me of the state of music in the early 1980s, when pop music was also kind of dead after disco, and country music from people like Kenny Rogers, Dolly Parton, suddenly got really big, kind of took over the pop area, and those songs were not really deep country songs or deep Western songs that Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers had. They were songs that were developed as popified songs that could take the place of the missing pop hits, and that continued until like Michael Jackson, MTV, and that whole new wave of '80s big glam sort of music came to the fore. The next big thing, and that was and Michael Jackson was the harbinger of that. Maybe in the early days, Cyndi Lauper, and then within a few years we have Bruce Springsteen, and suddenly all this pop music has washed away the country interlopers, and that's what I feel like has probably happened, is going to happen now, is that we're waiting for the next big thing. And here's my prediction. I think that the next big thing will be some girl who's a guitar girl. She doesn't have a breathy voice. It sounds like all the other people who are singing now. And she writes her own songs that are deep as opposed to kind of straight ahead, obvious, everyday experience lyrics. And she plays the guitar, and the rock sound will come back. Because I think right now people are listening to all these oldies and they're substituting the rock sounds. Here's the caveat. People would say, all of what you said is non-valid because the younger people are going to YouTube and are still making certain genres of music big, and the old people are listening to the radio. Certainly that has to be a part of it. So I still think there's a dip in pop music. Other thing people would say is because of the internet, there's a fragmentation of genres. So most of the people are not listening to one thing anymore. Since you can choose on the internet or with digital, you pick out your own stuff. But watch for that deeper voiced guitar girl who writes her own songs and plays rock music. That's my prediction of the next big thing that'll come and be seized upon and wipe away the little dalliance we're having into country music now with pop. And third are what things cost. And yeah, this is the first time I've ever come back to the U.S. in my lifetime, and seen the effects of high prices. The last time that happened, we had high inflation in the 70s, like 20% or something. It's really maybe too young to understand the ramifications of that at the time. But I see just about everything in the stores has doubled in price. The foodstuffs, and especially fast food, maybe it's quadrupled. I'm not sure what it is about the fast food industry that has caused that sort of price increase. I would think that anybody who wants to gain the public trust, as opposed to saying everything's better than it's ever been before, and maybe some macroeconomic indicators show a good result in the economy, but I would think anyone who wants to gain the trust of the public would be saying inflation is our number one priority. Because the average people, the people who have to go to the grocery store and shop, which are most of the people, they can see a stunning rise in prices. Probably for a lot of people, the first time in their whole lifetime they have been shocked by prices. Since everything's been pretty much under control since the 80s, price-wise. And those are the three big things I noticed. My big misshapen people of my countrymen, pop music, and what things cost. And I did have a couple other odds and ends here I jotted down. I don't understand, suddenly everyone started misusing the word whenever. So instead of, you're supposed to use the word when, and they say whenever. So you're trying to describe the one time the person came to their house and they beat him up. And you say, when he came to my house, that's how you're supposed to say it. But they say, whenever he came to my house. But they only mean one instance. So once you start to hear this, you hear it all the time. And it's a confusing misuse of that word. That's one thing. And the other thing is, the mispronunciation of the word often as often. I don't know why. It seems particularly maybe a function of YouTube. Almost everybody who's a creator on YouTube says often. I don't know why. I don't know where that came to be. When I grew up, I think there was some kid in the school who said it once and they laughed at him. And in the dictionary it showed often and often as like a non-standard or regional variant. But when you look it up now, they show both of them. So I guess it does show how dictionaries and things are reflective of how language is used as opposed to being instructive of how to use language. But it drives me crazy to hear often all the time. And my other prediction again, there's some factories here where workers have won the right to drink alcohol, and people say, look, they've won the right to drink alcohol at work, drink 1 or 2 beers at lunch, or even drink on the job. And they think that's amazing. I said, that's the way it used to be up until like 1980 when they changed all the laws. The feds got involved because there's too much drunk driving, and they changed laws so that they moved the voting age, like from a few states had it as, I think as 18. Everyone had to change it to 21, and all of the old union rules that allowed people to kind of be drunk at work, or if you worked at a beer factory, you could drink your beer. They went the wayside. So it shows everything comes around. Eventually, they're back to drinking at work now, and they think it's a brand new innovation, but it's just a return to the way things used to be. And I predict that at some point they're going to start lowering the drinking age again, down from 21 to something else, and people are going to think it's a brand new innovation, but it's just a return to the way things used to be. If you're interested in this sort of talking about the past and the present, there's some other videos on the site that refer to how present situation is sort of like the polarized situation of 1968, and you can see those. Maybe I'll put a link in there for these videos. So that's my impression of what the U.S. is, the biggest changes after my 5 years of being away. Bye-bye.